Good morning to everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Catskills. Our minister is Reverend Bob Janis-Dillon. I am Pat Hurst of the Worship Committee, and I'm the worship assistant this morning. We are excited to have attendees both in person and as well virtually on Zoom. A big welcome to everyone. Unitarian Universalist is a liberal religious faith that carries no creed and welcomes all seekers. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome here. We are guided by a set of principles and written sources that encompass the many ways that we come to know and understand the world, the universe, and the divine. Our principles are important here at UU Catskills, and we live our values in our daily lives. We affirm that Black Lives Matter. We are a welcoming congregation for the LGBTQ community. We are a congregational affiliate of the Ulster Immigrant Defense Network. We are an active voice in the effort to address climate change. Community circles connect our members with others that live in their local community. We have 9 circles in different areas who meet monthly, in person or online through Zoom. If you would like to get in touch with the circle in your area, feel free to contact our office administrator. And if you would like to contact someone else at Catskills, like the minister, religious education, the board, for those attending online, a contact list is shown on your screen. All of you can always visit our website, uucatskills.org, to find contact information, and if you would like to be added to our mailing list, to find the latest newsletter. If you are a visitor online and would like to be added to our mailing list, you can put your name and email address in the chat box area. We encourage you to read our February newsletter that is distributed through our email list. There you will find upcoming events for the month. There are several this coming week. On Sunday, today, we have grief support group at 7. On Monday, we have Buddha Cats meeting at 5. Tuesday, we have the Women's Circle at 7:30. On Tuesday, we also have a Climate Action Team meeting at 5. Wednesday, we have a presentation by the A.J. Williams Myers African Roof Center. It's Black in the Hudson Valley, and that's at 4. Thursday, we have bedtime stories and more for children and youth of all ages. On Saturday, we have a book group on defunding fear. A few announcements this morning. A reminder that the Climate Action Team is sponsoring an ongoing fundraiser with True Earth, a provider of environmental friendly home products, so that UU Catskills will receive 20% on all of your purchases. Please go to our website and make your purchase through the donate button. Also, there is still time for you to donate to the Ulster Immigrant Defense Fund. Drop your supplies at UU Catskills on Friday or Saturday from 10 to 1. And for the services in the next 2 weeks, next week we have Julio Torres, who will join us again from London. On March 6th, Reverend Bob will again be in the pulpit for an in-person service here at the sanctuary. Thank you, everyone, for assisting with today's service. Our hybrid services are made possible by our technical team. Bruce Wilde, who is here at the sanctuary, provides our live streaming. Our Zoom host this week is Jenny Giddy, and our usher, I don't have that name. After the service, for those attending via Zoom, please stay for our breakout room for a virtual coffee break. For our prelude this morning, Catherine Catabiani will perform Honey by Nathaniel Dett. This was written in 1913. It's from Dett's piano suite, In the Bottoms. It is about life in the river bottoms of the South.
Good morning. It is good to be together. Welcome, as Pat said, however you join us this morning, we are glad to be together. Let's just take a moment and breathe in, feel your feet wherever they are on the floor, and just at this moment, let's hope for a little bit of love, a little bit of community, a little bit of inspiration, of healing, a little bit of heading towards more justice world. It's so good to be together in this space and in this opportunity to build community together and to inspire one another. May it be a good hour together. We begin, as we do each Sunday, by lighting our chalice. And the words for our lighting our chalice this morning are by the great civil rights leader Fannie Lou Hamer. Nobody's free until everybody's free. When I liberate myself, I liberate others. If you don't speak out, ain't nobody going to speak out for you. Amen. Now I invite us to read together our unison affirmation. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love to all living beings. May we know once again that we are not isolated but connected. In wonder and joy, to mystery and miracle, in the universe, in this community, and in each other. Our opening words are a poem written by our own Bobby Katz in tribute to Martin Luther King Jr. They called him ML. The little boy who roughhoused with his brother, who sat between his mother and his grandmother on Sunday mornings, listening to his father's sermons. He listened more to the rhythm of the words than to the words themselves. Words he did not always understand. He felt the grown-ups around him carried by the words, the way the current carried branches and even trees down the stream. He saw the strength of words, their power. Someday, he told his mother, I'm going to get me some words, big words, strong words. And he did. Big Words, Strong Words by Bobby Katz. Now we'll sing together our opening hymn. It's hymn number 157, Step by Step, the Longest March. So we have our time of wonder. We have our wonder box here because we wonder what's in it, and also we are a community guided by wonder, who wonder at the heavens above and the moral universe in our hearts. Would anyone like to open the wonder boxes? Because if we don't open it, we don't have a story. So.
Here comes the volunteer. Ooh.
What do we have there, John?
We have a not green turtle.
A not green turtle. It is a turtle.
Well, it's got green on the other side.
And that's and if you may have read, some of you may have read ahead in the program and know that the story today is the tortoise and the hare. How many of you know the story of the tortoise and the hare? How many of you know the West African version of the tortoise and the hare? So there is a version, and I don't know. I mean, Aesop was just on the other side of the Mediterranean, and stories go back a long way. So I don't know which version came first, but there is a somewhat. So it may be this story. Maybe this version may be 3,000 years older. It may be. I know it's at least 10 or 20 years old, because there are many different versions of this on the internet. But there is a West African version of the tortoise and the hare, which is ever so slightly different, and I actually kind of like this one better. But there was a hare who challenged a tortoise to a race. They were sitting around talking, and the hare said, "I am the fastest, and you're so slow, and you can never win a race." And the tortoise felt kind of sad about that. You can say, "Ah," you know, yeah. And the tortoise said, "Well, I can race you." And in a moment of bravado, the tortoise said, "I will win." And the hare said, "Ha ha ha! You win? No. Let's have a race tomorrow." And the tortoise thought, "What have I done? There's no way I can win this race. It'll be embarrassing." But then the tortoise thought, well, she had lots of family and friends who might be able to help her. And so she went around, she said, "I'd like you all to help me on this race. Would you help me?" And the tortoise, the friend said, "Of course we will, tortoise, because you're our dear friend." So they all volunteered to. And is anyone willing to help the tortoise? Good. Okay, great. So we'll need your help. So if you want to make a tortoise shape, I think this kind of tortoise, whatever works for you. There we go. Okay. So, the hare didn't ask anybody, because the hare said, "Well, I'm the fastest. I can do everything by myself. That's it. I don't need anybody's help, and I'm way faster than tortoise." Ha 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 ha. And the next day, bright and early in the morning, they sat up and they got ready to race. And the hare raced ahead. The tortoise was way back behind the first hill, and the hare thought, this is going to be easy, no problem. But then the hare looked in front, and it seemed like, would somebody be the tortoise? The tortoise was winning. How did that work? Oh no, the hare said, I've got to go faster. So the hare went faster and faster, but then he looked ahead, and it seemed like the tortoise was in front of him. Was it? So he didn't know what to do. And he said, well, I got to find a new route. And he found a new route, and he kept going and found, but then he looked in front, and he saw that the tortoise was in the front. So the hare was so bewildered that eventually he sat in the dust, just sad about his chances. And the tortoise, slowly but surely, as you know from the story, came and crossed the finish line. And so that's the other story of how the tortoise and the tortoise defeated the hare. Now, there's lots of interpretations of this story, as there are of any story. Did the tortoise cheat? There's some questions about it. But one of the values that we think it teaches, because the tortoise did win the race, so no, I don't think so. But one of the stories is that the tortoise knew that we cross the finish line together, that it's not always just about who is the fastest. And the tortoise thanked all his friends and family, and then he came over to console the hare and said, well, on your own, you're faster than me, but maybe you should think about finding some community so we can do things together. So that's the story about the tortoise and the hare. The reading this morning's sermon, it involves another story, a biographical story of the Reverend Egbert Ethelred Brown. And I'll say more about that, obviously, in the sermon. But we're going to hear a reading from the book. The Reverend Mark Morrison Reed is the one who really brought Reverend Brown's life to, we knew about it, but he wrote a book about both Reverend Brown and Reverend Lewis McGee, which is another story that I won't share this time. So if Pat would read this reading, this is from Black Pioneers in a White Denomination by the Reverend Mark Morrison Reed.
Black Pioneers in a White Denomination. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, "Only through inner spiritual transformation do we gain the strength to fight vigorously the evils of the world in a humble and loving spirit. It was individual spirituality that strengthened the slaves, nurtured Martin Luther King Jr., enlivened black religion, and can perhaps help religious liberalism to further evolve. What is this spirituality, and how can Unitarian Universalism introduce it into our religious communities? The Latin word for spirit means breath, or the breath of God. This spirit comes in many forms and appears in many places, but it always comes as a breath of new life that inspires and revitalizes the human condition. Spirituality allows the individual to span the chasm that divides one from the other, and it reveals to us the eternal truth that all people are one. For the depth of our experience of life is our common bond, our common tongue. In Unitarianism, we can move toward spirituality by moving away from the abstract discursiveness of our sermons and toward a profounder use of story. The objective of our stories must be to engage the whole person. The Bible has endured because of the depth and richness of its stories, how it speaks to the human condition. Yet this potential rests in many stories. The story of Ethelred Brown's life seized me. Emotionally, I am angered by the racism he faced and his neglect of his family. I am saddened by the loss of his son, the fate of his wife, and the end of his Harlem church. and I am in awe of his persistence. One cannot help but be touched by the tragic quality of his life. Intellectually, his story raises the issues of racism, internalized oppression, suffering, midlife crisis, commitment, and responsibility. Politically, it points to the work that has yet to be done. Brown had some success. He did force the American Unitarian Universalist Association to look at Black America. That limited success was clearly just a beginning. Again, what is important about Brown's story is that the readers is inevitably touched. The element of spirituality is introduced by the identification we all feel with Brown.
More on that story to come. In the meantime, we now enter into a time of meditation, reflection, contemplation, prayer. And we begin with joys and sorrows, where if anyone has something on their heart, a momentous event in their lives or the lives of those they love, they are warmly invited to share things.
Tomorrow is Austin's birthday, and believe it or not, it's going to be 15. Well, which is amazing.
Happy birthday to Austin. Yeah, I can bring the. And I forgot to mention, if you are online, if you could type them in the chat, and then we can read them aloud.
So our daughter moved to Florida almost a year and a half ago, and we did see her in Maine last summer, but she has not been back to our home in Hurley, and she's unexpectedly sort of coming today. So we are really excited.
For your daughter coming today. A joy.
I am happy to announce that my friend Wendy is home and doing well.
Rejoice with you for Wendy's safe and healthy homecoming. We have one from the chat here. One from Mark Howenstein. Mark's brother Jeff has made it through the first phase of his CAR-T cancer treatment. A traumatic week, obviously, but with a hope of recovery ahead. So we keep Mark's brother Jeff in our thoughts and prayers. Aaron, we celebrate Carol Ryder, Aaron's mom and beloved of this congregation, 85th birthday this past week. So happy birthday, Carol. I believe that's any other joys and sorrows. Well, we know we gather with many joys and sorrows and hopes and anxieties on our hearts, but with one spirit. So we keep all of the tumultuousness of our lives in our hearts and unite together in community and love. Let us gather together in the spirit of meditation and reflection and prayer. I thought we would begin with the words of the great preacher Howard Thurman. He writes, "Open unto me light for my darkness. Open unto me courage for my fear. Open unto me hope for my despair. Open unto me peace for my turmoil. Open unto me joy for my sorrow. Open unto me strength for my weakness. Open unto me wisdom for my confusion. Open unto me forgiveness for my sins. Open unto me love for my hates. Open unto me thyself for myself." These are the words of Howard Thurman. And as we pray, as we meditate, or as we simply breathe in and out the silence together, perhaps we feel a bit of opening in our lives, a slight expansion in the chest, an easing of the spaces within our worried minds, a sense of a wider, almost ununderstandable peace that greets us at times, even at the times when life is most difficult. As we simply present to our breath, let us let the air in, the Spirit into the anxious places of our souls. Aware that we are held in the bosom of this universe, we are stardust in open space, and the waters of the world gently rock within us. We'll observe a little time of silence now, and as we breathe in, breathe out, I invite us to feel ourselves gently find those open places, those places that are open to a little more truth, more light, more wisdom, more justice, and a growing sense of peace. May peace be with us in our world. We think of the Ukraine this week, in our communities, in our country, and in ourselves. Amen.
Between the mask and the glasses, taking them on and off. This month, our half plate donation is shared with A.J. Williams Myers African Roots Center in Kingston. Their mission is to promote literacy through teaching and learning about the African roots experience, including history and culture, through a dynamic exchange of information, ideas, and creativity. At the sanctuary for giving this morning, our plates will be passed by Karen and Judith. For our online viewers, you can give in 3 ways, as shown on your screen at our website. At our website is number 1, by texting the number or by mailing your check to our address in Kingston. The offertory is Sweet Thames Flow Softly by Ewan McCall. It's performed by Catherine. No, it's performed by Constant. We have a treat this morning.
Another C word. I I met my love at Woolwich Pier, beneath a big crane standing. And oh, the love I felt for her, it passed all understanding. Took her sailing on the river, flow, sweet river, flow. London town was mine to give her, sweet Thames, flow softly. Made the Thames into a crown, flow, sweet river, flow. Made a brooch of silver town, sweet Thames, flow softly. At London Yard I held her hand, at Blackwall Point I faced her, at the Isle of Dogs I kissed her mouth and tenderly embraced her. Heard the bells of Greenwich ringing, flow, sweet river, flow. All the time my heart was singing, sweet Thames, flow softly. Limehouse Reach I gave her there, flow, sweet river, flow, as a ribbon for her hair, sweet Thames, flow softly. From Shadwell Dock to Nine Elms Reach, we cheek to cheek were dancing. Her necklace made of London Bridge, her beauty was enhancing. Kissed her once again at Wapping, flow, sweet river, flow. After that there was no stopping, sweet Thames, flow softly. Richmond Park, it was her ring, flow, sweet river, flow. I'd have given her anything, sweet Thames, flow softly. From Rotherhithe to Putney Bridge, my love I was declaring, and she from Kew to Isleworth her love to me was swearing. Love had set my heart at burning, flow, sweet river, flow. Never saw the tide was turning, sweet Thames, flow softly. Gave her Hampton Court a twist, flow, sweet river, flow, into a bracelet for her wrist, sweet Thames, flow softly. But now, alas, the tide has changed. My love, she has gone from me, and winter's frost has touched my heart and put a blight upon me. Creeping fog is on the river, flow, sweet river, flow. Sun and moon and stars gone with her, sweet Thames, flow softly. Swift the Thames runs to the sea, flow, sweet river, flow, bearing ships and part of me. Sweet Thames, flow softly.
Thank you for your generosity that sustains and grows this beloved community. And thank you for the song, Constance. As those place names are familiar to me, having spent the last 6 years in England, and they bring it home in a new way, that sense of bittersweet, the exile, the sense of being away from somewhere and hearing the names. So this February, the theme for this month, which I mentioned last week here at the congregation, is widening the circle. And February is also Black History Month, as you know, and you probably can tell by the readings, and probably we should not make it a February thing and integrate our readings and our music every month, which to some extent we do. We could do better, but we do try and widen the circle of where we draw inspiration from in this congregation at UUCC. And today's service alludes to the story of Egbert Ethelred Brown, who is one of our great circle wideners of our Unitarian Universalist tradition. He's a pioneer in the Unitarian Universalist movement. He founded congregations in both Jamaica and Harlem in New York City. However, his story illustrates just how difficult it can be to widen the circle when racism, prejudice, and a lack of institutional imagination trammel our best efforts. And I say it's a love story because his story is definitely a story of devotion and determination in the face of what must have seemed at times insurmountable odds. It's a story of faithfulness to hope when things look bleak. Egbert Ethelred Brown was born in Jamaica in 1875. At the age of 32, he had a steady government job. He was trained as an accountant. He was married with children and was a regular churchgoer when at his uncle's house he stumbled across a sermon by the Unitarian William Ellery Channing. This was one of the great 19th century sermons. Reading about God being one and reading about the benefits of a rational religion, and Brown had always had questions growing up about everything from the Athanasian Creed to the miracle stories in the Bible. Brown decided he was a Unitarian. And not only that, he wanted to become a minister, which you don't need to do to be a Unitarian, but Brown had felt the calling to the ministry. And he sent a letter addressed to any Unitarian minister in New York City. I have to give credit to the Jamaican and U.S. Postal Services because that letter, addressed to any Unitarian minister in New York City, eventually found its way to the Reverend George Badger, a Unitarian minister, who passed it along to the president of Meadville Theological School, Franklin Southworth. I also went to Meadville many years after Reverend Brown. President Southworth was committed to, as he told it, solving the race problem. And so he was enthusiastic by this letter, and he invited Brown to attend the school and started to arrange scholarships, which were typical for all those entering the ministry to help them find their way. So Southworth was an early supporter, but this encouragement was not universal. Several Unitarians tried to dissuade Egbert from entering the ministry, saying that as a black man, he was unlikely to ever find a parish to minister in. Now, it's important to stress that the Unitarians, by and large, even then, like to think of themselves as liberal, and most would say they were opposed to racism. But the prejudices of the age were as rife in the seminary as anywhere else. In those days, this was the early 1900s, fellow students would tell Ethelred Brown, "You must have some white blood in you," when he produced an impressive bit of scholarship. And there were other barriers as well. He had to delay seminary by a year because the first time he landed on these shores, he was deported by immigration officials because he had an offer of some work as an accountant, and they sent him back to Jamaica. So he had to wait a whole year. Many people, that would be the end of the journey, but Brown was undaunted, waited a year, worked in Jamaica, and came back the next year and was successful. In 1912, Reverend Brown was ordained and went to Jamaica as a Unitarian missionary. He received a little bit of funding to set up a church, but this funding came with the oversight of the American Unitarian Association, as it was then known, and with the occasional patronizing advice and criticism. They wondered why Egbert was trying to found this church in Montego Bay, where he came from, rather than the main city of Kingston. They noted and lamented that there was prejudice in Jamaica, too. Reverend Brown had quite dark skin, and lighter-skinned Jamaicans could be hesitant to be led by someone of a darker hue. And when the church plant did not meet with immediate success, and most church plants don't, they started to withdraw funding. Of course, it typically takes many years to start a new endeavor like this, but the white leaders of the American Unitarian Association, who in principle, again, were against racism, were unwilling to put their collective pocketbooks where their mouths were. Reverend Brown made trips to Boston to persuade people. He wrote umpteen letters to the denomination, and most of these were unsuccessful. He pointed out that Jamaica had many new churches from other denominations, including historically black churches, that were much better funded, much better funded than the Unitarians. Would the Unitarians take a chance on him? But in short, they kept the strings close. After a year, they transferred him to Kingston, Jamaica, which basically meant he had to start all over again in a new city. And 18 months after that, they withdrew the funds. But Egbert Brown did not easily give up. His efforts in Jamaica did not succeed, so in 1920, Reverend Brown moved to Harlem in New York City with the intention of starting a Unitarian church there. As you probably know, Harlem in the 20s was one of the most amazing places in the history of the world. During the Harlem Renaissance, Zora Neale Hurston, Louis Armstrong, Langston Hughes, and Josephine Baker all lived in the same neighborhoods and inspired one another. Reverend Brown arrived in Harlem a month after Paul Robeson. He sparred intellectually with Marcus Garvey, whose views Brown disagreed with. It was in that great cultural mecca that Reverend Brown established the Harlem Unitarian Church. This time, the American Unitarian Association was not funding his ministry. While he worked tirelessly to build up a church, Brown worked 5 years as an elevator operator. Now, he was a qualified accountant, remember, but could not find employment in that line in America in the 1920s. And he said sometimes other Unitarians would not take him seriously because he worked in a blue-collar field. And I think that classism is still very much in operation sometimes in Unitarianism. He later worked as a speaker, professional speaker for the Youth Socialist Party. And then he received condemnation for different reasons, for political and not class reasons. In spite of these challenges and many others, the Harlem Unitarian Church lasted from 1920 up until Reverend Brown's death in 1956. It was a remarkable institution. It was known as a temple and a forum. A temple because they did hold worship services there. It was a place of the Spirit. But the forum was equally important. Reverend Brown was keen on rationality and rational religion. And he criticized the black church and in large for often having a focus on the next world and ignoring social justice problems in this one, and the intellect and justice. And now that same criticism could be leveled at most white churches as well, of course. And Harlem Unitarian Church and its minister were devoted to discussing the pressing issues of the day, institutional and personal racial injustice, and Reverend Brown would often send off a letter when he saw a wrong that might be righted, capitalism and socialism and communism, war and peace, which of course was a big issue in the early part of the 20th century, as it is today. Brown himself was a fervent debater, but democratic in his principles. At a forum where he spoke at length against Marcus Garvey, he then allowed his detractors the floor for 20 minutes, and then another 10, even as the atmosphere in the room became increasingly heated with the strongly opposing views. We can be a fractious bunch, us Unitarians. The Reverend Morrison Reed, the author of the biography which this is summarized from, paints a compelling portrait of Egbert Brown. He was a far from perfect person. He wasn't trying to paint a perfect picture of a perfect person, because none of us are. Brown could be vain. He was opinionated, sometimes to the point of obstinacy. He was criticized for having expensive taste for his family, but that was probably unfair. He was criticized for putting his children in private school in Jamaica on the proceeds, but he wanted the best for them. And perhaps this was the only way to really get them in school as a preacher's kids. Brown did not have loads of charisma in a profession that could have made use of that. He was not a Howard Thurman or a Martin Luther King Jr. So he wasn't perfect, but one of the many pernicious aspects about racism and prejudice and all oppressions really is how a person will be punished for imperfections that would likely be overlooked, or at least viewed as part of some greater total package in a less prejudiced system. In the 20th century, and I think still in the 21st, white people can be allowed to be quirky, to have flaws, and their better qualities may be stressed as they shine through. And that is not always the case, or was not the case for a black pioneer in a white denomination. And no one would deny that Egbert Ethelred Brown was incredibly devoted to the cause, that he was deeply intelligent and astute, that he was faithful. My goodness, was he faithful through so many challenges in his life. Were he a white minister in our mostly white denomination, he would be lauded. But Brown was treated with suspicion and all too often dismissed as needy or a crank, even though he was one of our best hopes for integration. Brown was faithful to the cause of Unitarianism in Jamaica and Harlem at a terrible cost to his family. His wife suffered from mental trauma and could be found wandering the streets helpless at times. His eldest son committed suicide. Many observers noted that the stress in Reverend Brown's life, the amount of discouragement he faced and the effects of that on his family must have been at least a factor in the overall stress that his family faced. Now, on a personal level, it's worth hearing the story because the story of Egbert Brown is a testament to the indomitable human spirit. How many of us have faced bumps on the road along the way, career setbacks, personal setbacks, even sometimes oppressions for some of us. And Brown never gave up. And because he never gave up, as the reading mentioned, Brown continually reminded the American Unitarian Association of the importance of Black America. On a wider level, it shows just how pernicious and how persistent the forces of racism and other oppressions can be in this country. Now, Reverend Brown was a minister in our supposedly progressive faith. If you ask Unitarians in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s what they thought about racism, most, not all, but most would have answered similarly to Unitarians today, I suspect. That is, most people would say that racism was bad and should be ended, that blacks and whites should live together in peace and have equal rights, and everyone else for that matter. But this lofty intention did not square entirely with the practicalities of actual life and the facts on the ground. Meaning well did not stop the Unitarian movement from being, at times, institutionally racist. And I think these kind of self-critical stories are important, not to guilt trip one another, but just so we take a good hard look at how racism and other oppressions really work. I think so often when discussing racism, white liberals especially love to focus on the extreme, obvious instances of racism, the ethnic slur, the hate crime, because if we can say, well, I would never do that, I would never use an ethnic slur, commit violence, then I know I'm in the clear, right? We can say, well, I wouldn't do that, therefore I'm not racist. But the history of the churches in Harlem and Kingston show how racism can work more subtly and be perpetuated by well-meaning, liberally minded people. If we want to be truly anti-racist, it's not enough to just not commit hate crimes or want the best for people of every ethnicity and background. We need to actively challenge the ways racism is perpetuated. Another way to put it is racism is the default setting on the American machine. We need to take a good hard look at our programming, see what can be changed, and do the work. One effort at anti-racism from within our own movement is the UUA's 8th Principle Project. As you may have heard at the beginning of the service, Unitarian Universalism, we don't have a creed, but we do have principles, 7 of them at the moment, that define how we would like to be together. This number has not always been 7. It does change. The last one was added, I believe, in the 1980s, which is a long time ago now. And an 8th principle was proposed that will likely be voted on by the whole association, including delegates from this congregation, if we wish, in 2023 or 2024. It takes a long time. This process has been going on for years. Congregations can vote on the 8th principle individually as well, and it's already been adopted by several congregations nationwide. The proposed 8th principle reads, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions." Now, I hope we might consider this principle here within this congregation over the next couple of years. I know we're all aware that centuries of racism have left terrible scars within our society and within our global society, really. And we can get hung up on the words, though, as Bobby Katz's poem reminds us, words do matter, and words have a way, if they're the right words, to heal, to help us to remember, to help us reconcile, and to help us redeem. But it's not about whether we have 3 principles, or 7, or 8, or 29 principles. It's about what do we pay attention to, and what do we ignore. Our Unitarian movement throughout Reverend Brown's ministry was happy to meet at our various institutions around the country and talk about peace and justice and universal brotherhood. The language was very patriarchal back then. While our church in Harlem withered on the vine, unloved and unsupported. We can do better. We are, in fact, doing better. The UUA is a lot more diverse than it was even 10 years ago, and that didn't happen by accident. It happened because of devoted love, because of groups of people that together look for ways that could widen the circle, be actively welcoming in ways that weren't paternalistic, in ways that centered the voices of the historically marginalized. And I believe it happened in some extent because of Reverend Brown's life himself, which is one of the amazing things about these love stories, isn't it? We have an impact beyond our own span of years. The great Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, an African-American poet, member of First Unitarian Philadelphia, campaigner for the rights of women, African Americans, and the poor, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper wrote in 1866, "We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity, and society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul." America has cursed itself for too long. We have trampled upon our bravest and our brightest, those who fought the status quo and dreamed of better days. We have trampled on our weakest and our feeblest, those who were struggling just to get by in a world that didn't treat them like they mattered. But the time is always ripe for America to become a place of blessing. Widening the circle means looking at all the unconscious biases, all the unconquered fears that keep us from living out the dream of unity and beloved community. Looking at them with compassion, yes, but also looking at them fearlessly. It isn't always easy work, but we owe it to our spiritual ancestors, including Fannie Lou Hamer and Frances Ellen Watkins Harper and Ethelred Egbert Brown. We owe it to our spiritual ancestors to not give up on the dream of a faith for heart and mind and soul, of temples and forums of mutual encouragement, of a society that actively lives out beloved community. May we build that faith together. Amen. Now let us sing together lovely, stirring hymn. Hymn number 170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People. Brethren, let us have the courage to love one another. And I say courage because loving one another sometimes demands something of us. Sometimes it brings out anger when one of us is wronged, brings out sorrow when one of us is going through hard times. It means we have to apologize when we make mistakes, and we will. It means we need to show up for one another, speak up for one another, and speak up for ourselves as well. Let us have the courage to love one another, for it is in this love that the most meaningful life, the life together, the life of beloved community, is lived out. May it be so. Amen. We extinguish our chalice with the words we read each week. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of communion. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. From you I receive, to you Thank you to everyone who made this service possible and shoveled the walks and did everything to make this service happen. Thank you for coming in whatever form you're here today. If you're joining us on Zoom, I hope you'll join our breakout rooms. If you're here today, I hope maybe meet someone new before you leave this morning. And have a wonderful day. Peace be with you. Amen.